list configuration and employees and certifications menu. You'll see I'm in this test database, demo database, and we've already got a plethora of certifications in here already. But I do want to kind of go through just some of the parameters here, kind of what they do, what they mean. Some of them are kind of self-explanatory. But let me just kind of start here just with an existing certification, our bloodborne pathogens. I know that is a very popular one that is very, very common. So obviously we've got this number of days valid field, pretty self-explanatory. That's how many days that certification would remain valid, and that working in concert with the validations and the warnings and on target. There would be warnings that would start popping up if we've exceeded that 364, 365 days. Number of days before reminder, kind of similar, works in concert with this. So 30 days prior to that expiration, which I'm going to show you in just a bit, is based on the date of completion. That reminder would then go out at that specified number of days before it expires. And then we also have, this was actually a new-ish kind of enhancement, came in not too many years ago, but a reminder intervals. If I kind of expand this a little bit, days from expiration, it's kind of what that says. So this is a great example of that. So starting kind of at 30 days and then counting backwards in reverse, this would basically say, system, start sending out reminders at 30 days prior to expiration. Now send a reminder out at 25, send one at 20. So it's a countdown of sorts, right? So not to get too annoying, of course, but you can define the number of times and the specificity around when those reminders go out based on the expiration date. And so you can have a little more granularity around when those reminders go out. This is some of these are fairly new. This end of the EOM stands for end of month expiration or end of month expire. So this really was just intended to accommodate some of those requests that we had gotten, some of those enhancement requests around the need for an end of month. I think that's very applicable to like staff engagement, or where staff are needing to be supervised, right? Like there's a monthly supervision, something of that sort. Enable MAR, we actually don't. You'll notice we've got a medication administration cert in here, Enable MAR. That one, a lot of our folks aren't using as much now because, if you haven't heard, we are integrated with a very sophisticated EMAR platform, Carasalva. So some of that has taken the place of the built-in MAR functionality and on target, the EMAR. But for what it's worth, that basically identifies that certification as a MAR cert. Okay. So we would validate and say, okay, if I'm using the MAR built into on target, if I don't have that EMAR cert, then I can't pass medications, right? Inactivate, pretty self-explanatory. Client specific. If that is checked, I'll just bounce very quickly. Let's find a record. What that basically means is under the certifications tab, that would show up as an option. Okay. We don't typically think about certifications showing up under the clients tab, but in on target, we have the ability to validate client-specific certifications, client-specific training. So think on the order of, hey, to work with this individual, I need to have diastat training. Or maybe I need to have very specific training around seizure. drops, right? Things of that nature, maybe even like ABA training, something of that nature. So that's where you can basically say, yes, I do want this to show up in that menu, or I don't. So that was actually a newer thing that kind of came into, I think, alongside that end of month expiration. The reminders, just to kind of give you guys an idea, the reminders will go out to the employee or to the staff via task and on target. And if you do have their corresponding email set up, it would also go out currently via email. So that's kind of who that goes to. They do not currently go to the assigned supervisor. However, I'm going to show you guys some really, really good reporting that you can do. Reports available around certifications where you can run those and see when things expire, and just take a more proactive approach. So that's really the configuration end of things. Any questions around that just before we move on? If you've got anything, certainly you can pop it into the Q&A or into the chat. If not, we'll just kind of keep rolling in the interest of time. So that is configuration of certifications. So that's kind of that first step. If you've got a brand new database, or maybe you've got some new certifications, some things that you're needing to keep track of, that's where you would want to go and get those added. If you don't have those global parameters set, I would definitely encourage that. That can be a huge time saver. If you know something is very regular, very repeated, it expires every 365 days, or maybe it's like first aid CPR at 720. Those global defaults can be a huge help and big time saver. All right, guys. So the next thing I want to kind of keep moving here is certification templates. Okay, looks like maybe we've got a in the chat here. And I have a question. Okay, Marie. If I check a certification under the client file, will that cert populate on the assigned employee certification page regardless of their template? Let me think about this. If I check a certification under the client file, will that cert? No, it does not. No, that's more around, yeah, that would be great. I see what you're saying there, Marie. No, it does not auto pop to the employee cert. What that really is designed for, there is a specific validation that says check for this client-specific certification that's within the employee record. So it really is a 1-2. You've got to kind of identify it in the client record. Saying, yep, anybody working with this individual has to have that, and then you've got to add that corresponding cert manually at the employee record. That is, again, unless you've got the Relias integration. Relias integration will do some auto-populating for you as well. So keep that in mind too. Good question. All right, guys. So template configuration, let's kind of keep going here. If I just go ahead and populate this grid. So templates are a great time saver as well. We talked about those global defaults and those ways that you can set up those certification parameters back at list configuration. But templates are a way of pulling in multiple certifications, multiple certification types into employee and staff records, essentially as a bulk function. Okay. So if I open this one up, we just have this one titled Standard Certifications. And you've got three kind of flavors of this. You've got an administrative type, you've got a job title type, and a cost center type. Just very brief explanation of this. Administrative is global. That basically means this certification template with the selected certifications will apply to all staff, to all employees company-wide. Okay. So once you apply that template, and I'll show you how you do that, you apply that template to an employee record, everybody gets it, right? So that would be at the administrative level. The next would be at the job title level. So if you have a certain subset of certifications that are applicable just to DSPs, for instance, or just to host home providers or direct care staff, that's where you can define by job title. These are the individuals that should get this subset of certifications. Okay. And then finally, cost center, typically that corresponds to location. It can be programmatic as well and on target if you're familiar with cost centers. But that is a third way of defining a training template and how it should get applied to an employee or staff record. So let me just kind of go through very quickly. I'm going to create a new training template. We're just going to call it direct care. Okay. But we're going to base this one on job title instead of based on administrative. So if I just start typing here, right, I can use most of our drop downs have type ahead functionality. So I want this template to apply to the job title of direct care. Okay, so I'm going to pick a couple here that are not part of that administrative. So let me find medication administration. Let's go to monthly supervision. That's a great one for DSPs. Supervision plans, annual. Yeah, that's good. Let's kind of go with those three just so you guys kind of get the idea. All right. So again, we've got one that's administrative. We got one that's based on job title. And now I want you guys to kind of see how this applies to an employee record or to a staff record. So not super creative here. We just called this an employee record. So if I open this up and I go to certifications, you will notice that currently there are no certifications with this employee. So I could certainly go this route of adding individual certifications. There's nothing wrong with that. You could certainly, and you may want to do that for these one-offs, right? Again, I go back to Marie and your question with those client specifics. Let's say that this individual needs to have trach training, right, in order to work with an individual. And we can say, yep, this was done on this date and it expires, let's say, in 1 year. And then maybe we want a date reminder to go out on 30 days prior, right? 3/31/2026. May have added something incorrect here. There we go. Yeah, so there you go. There's an example of like just kind of a one-off, right? So you can certainly always add certifications individually. But the beauty of the certification templates is you can add these certifications in bulk, okay? So to do that, again, I'm going to open this back up just to kind of refresh. I go to certifications. Well, I don't see those. However, I know that I've got this administrative, which is sort of this global certification that everybody should have. And then I've got this brand new template that is based on job title of direct care. And I know that employee record is a direct care staff. So how do I get those certification templates that I've created to populate to the employee record? Well, it's actually very simple. I just simply hit save. Okay. And when I do that, there's the magic, right? So there's all of those certifications that blew in, and you can see that's really a combination of a global template where I had, CPR first aid, bloodborne pathogens, everybody needs to have background check and driver's license check. But then I have these very DSP specific ones like supervision plan, monthly supervisions, like all of those things, right? So, so that's kind of how we get the templates applied. That's how we get them kind of added to the record. And then we've got, guys, if I look, let's just look back at configure and let's go very quickly to certifications. And we know that, for instance, bloodborne pathogens has a shelf life of 365 days. We should get a reminder at 30 days, but then we also have these reminder intervals, sort of a countdown, if you will. So if I go to bloodborne pathogens and I say, well, this was completed on 4/1, and then here's what you got to keep in mind. I then tab and check out what just happened. That 365, 364, if you will, that just auto-populated to the date of expiration based on my date of completion. And it's based on those parameters that I set back at configure list configuration certifications. And you'll also notice that the date reminder also auto-populated. But it all kind of is coming in based on that date completed, okay? And then I just hit update and that saves that record. So that, again, huge time saver. Not sure if CPR had that as well, but we'll just kind of go ahead and try it. Yep, there we go. Same thing. So auto-populated. And then, you know, you guys kind of get the idea. You're entering those date of completion. If you've got something where it doesn't expire, then it simply doesn't expire, right? If it's this was completed on this date and it doesn't really have a date of expiration, maybe it's like part of intake for that staff and it's a one and done. Or you could certainly set the date of expiration out to a way future, 2099 date of expiration too. So you've got that as an option as well. So that's kind of how you get those dates added. That's how you get the dates populated. That's how you get those reminders. And again, those reminders are set to go directly to the staff to notify them, hey, you've got your driver's license, or like your auto insurance is coming due. We need that, right? So that's how those notifications work in tandem with the certifications that you get plugged into OnTarget. Like I said, right at the end, I'm going to save. I know we're running out of time a little bit. I'm going to save a little bit of time just for the Relias integration, because some of that will flow into here and works in conjunction with OnTarget certifications, date completions, expirations, and reminders. So I don't want to miss that for you guys, for anybody who's interested. You can certainly always manually add a task as well. If you said, hey, and that's what these icons, DMS would be where you can upload a copy of something. So a perfect example of that is I need to upload a copy of the driver's license, right? So I would give a description here, right? Employee record, driver's license, 2025. Maybe you scanned that, you've got that scanned file, that attachment, you browse to it, you attach it, and now you've got sort of that hard copy, if you will, attached right there. Another important thing is the tasks. So if you need to, and again, tasks is just messaging and OnTarget, right? So if I did specifically need a message to go to Supervisor Sam around a particular certification, let's say like trach training, for instance, right? And I needed to say, oh my gosh, I've got to loop Supervisor Sam in on this. Please ensure that trach training is completed prior to start of work, right? Something of that nature. So that's where you do also have this ability to send manual tasks that are related to certifications. We then give a hyperlink. It shows up in Supervisor Sam's task list. So you certainly do have this ability to loop in other folks, to loop in supervisors, loop HR staff, anybody else who would need to be included in on that. So that's kind of how that happens, and of course, delete this the trash can. Can't forget about that. All right, real quickly, I do want to show you just a couple of other things. I do want to show you sort of an example of some validations around the certifications. So we think about, like these warnings, right? So if I said, let me just go ahead and kind of try to schedule Supervisor Sam with Johnny Cool. And let's say he's going to be doing a little bit of community networking. And that was from 8 to 10 this morning. And I'm showing you this as scheduling because we present these validations in multiple places. We present it at scheduling. We present it when folks go to write notes, when they go to sign notes, when you go to process billing. We would present these validations, depending on how you set this up, saying, hey, warning, this person is out of compliance on this certification, right? So check this out. When I hit save, I'm going to get a list of these warnings. And if I scroll down here to the bottom, I've got some that are specific to employee certification. So Supervisor Sam is out of compliance, right? I've got my driver's license is out of compliance, employee certification, driver's license renewal, my medication administration has also expired, my supervision plan, has not been completed. I can also export this list, right? So if HR needs to get on top of this, or maybe I need to reach out to a program director or a QP to get on top of this, this is where we are sort of linking the certification with the warnings, right? Because that's, ultimately there's reporting around it, but we also want these warnings where somebody's out of compliance. Those reports are certainly more proactive. I'm going to show you that in about 1 minute or less. So that's kind of an example of those certification warnings. Very quickly, if you haven't seen this is all very role specific. So for instance, if I go to DSP and validations, this is what we're talking about is caregiver certifications, right? So it's kind of a 1-2 punch. Do you want to enforce it? And then if that warning comes up for that DSP saying, hey, you're out of compliance on your CPR first aid. We don't want you working with anybody until you have re-upped your CPR first aid. This is a way of just kind of like a cold stop. We enforce the rule and, hey, we aren't even going to allow an override. We aren't going to allow you to complete service documentation and work with this individual until you are in compliance. So just to kind of understand, we've got a full validation engine. We've got all of this that works in concert with certifications. Again, you've got those export options, all those good things. I promise, guys, I've got about, I know we just hit the 12 o'clock mark, probably run about maybe 3, maybe 4 minutes over. Let me just very quickly show you the employee certifications reporting. So here at the dashboard, a very proactive approach. For instance, if I wanted to say, look, I want to see everybody that has certifications that are expiring at the end of the month. I want to see anybody that's got a cert that expired before 6/1/2025. Okay. And you've got all of these filters at your disposal. You can drill down into a cost center. You can drill into specific certifications. and then hitting generate report just does a search, and then here you go. Some of these, I think it's again because we're in a test database, we're seeing kind of some older data, but certainly you can then export this, and when you export, you get the option to export into multiple file types. So you can take it to Excel, do a little bit of data manipulation, filtering, all that good stuff. You can certainly take it to PDF. But I know many, many agencies that use this, and they will take it to Excel, they will parse it out, and they're going to send it to Q's, they're going to send it to HR, they're going to send it to whomever in compliance that needs to be on top of this, right? To make sure that you remain in compliance. So that's the reporting piece around that. And again, you can export that. You can do some sophisticated filtering here, sort of expiring after, expiring before. You can do it based on completion date and reminders. Last thing I do want to show you guys is, and kind of talk about, is the Relias integration. If you are interested in Relias integration, if you certainly, the first step to that is that you are a Relias customer already, or you already using Relias, have a Relias account. If you have an interest in getting integrated with OnTarget and Relias data syncing, one thing to note is currently that is a one-way sync. So currently that is Relias data that is pulling one way back into OnTarget. And what we're pulling really, if I go back into an employee record, let me just kind of pull up that, let's see, our employee was employee record, right? So kind of what we're talking about is we would be pulling from Relias, from the Relias system, the date of completion, which would pull back into OnTarget and sync into OnTarget, which would then allow for sort of the downstream syncing of the date of expiration and the date reminders. Okay, so the primary two primary things we're pulling is the description, so the what is the certification, and then when was it completed, and then OnTarget sort of takes over and says, okay, based on your parameters, here's the expiration date, and here are reminders. Okay, so Relias integration is really not that hard to get started with in OnTarget. This is just a spreadsheet that we would send you. Most important thing here is the mapping of the certifications. So this is an example of something that you will probably see on the Relias side. The Relias certification may be something like this: defensive training, the basics, and then there would be like a code that kind of follows after that. And then maybe in OnTarget, it's just simply you have defined it as defensive driving. Okay. And then we would get that listing, right? So kind of column A is what is it called in Relias. Column B is what is it called in Map2 and OnTarget. Pretty simple. And then we would just need your company username, password, credentials for your Relias account. And then once that's set up, once that's done, we pass that over to our support and development teams, and they'll get you up and running, and we get that sync turned on with OnTarget.